is Molyneux Does, and today I will be reading more from my book as a child growing up. A book from my childhood. The Book of Brownies by Enid Blyton. If you have just come on to here for the first time, I would recommend you listening / watching the first part of the Book of Brownies, just so you know where you are, so you don't get lost. Anyway, without further ado, let's go. The Book of Brownies, the Book of Brownies, the Book of Brownies, the Book of Brownies, 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 brownies. And let's continue. Their adventure in the land of giants. The broomstick went sailing away in the air, and Hop, Skip, and the mermaid clung to it tightly. They were all very sad, thinking of poor Jump left behind. They didn't know what might happen to him. Poor Jump, said the mermaid. Poor Jump, said Skip. Poor, began Hop. Then he stopped. I say, he said hopefully. What? Asked the other two. Supposing I rub some of the ointment that makes people bigger onto the broomstick. It might make it grow bigger. Then we could go back and fetch Jump, cried the mermaid. So Hop got out of the yellow ointment and rubbed some of it onto the end of the broomstick. It immediately grew much smaller, and Hop nearly fell off. He just managed to hang on round Skip's waist. Oh, you silly, cried Skip. That's the wrong ointment. Quickly he took the purple ointment from Hop's pocket, though he nearly tumbled off in reaching it. Immediately it grew enormously large. Oh, matron. Gracious, giggled Hop, who was now sitting down firmly again. There's room for 20 people at least. They turned the broomstick back to the island, and soon after arrived at the castle again. They landed at the front door. There was a terrible noise going on, and dust flew in clouds out of the windows of one of the upstairs rooms. They're still trying to settle who's the strongest, said Hop. I'll run and fetch Jump. He jumped off and ran indoors. There he found Jump looking very scared indeed. How astonished and glad he was to see Hop. Come on, you brave little brownie, called Hop. We've made the broomstick bigger and there's room for you. Jump scurried out with Hop and mounted the broomstick with the others. Then once more the magic rhyme was said, and the broomstick rose into the air. Oh, I am glad to be with you, said Jump, sighing gladly. The wizard and the red goblin were behaving in a terrible manner. They kept changing each other into different things and chasing about all over the place. Well, about as strong as each other," said Hop cheerfully, "so they'll probably have a jolly time fighting each other for a good many days yet." The broomstick went sailing on and on over the sea in the bright moonlight, and soon left the island far behind. Suddenly the mermaid gave a shriek of joy. "There is my home!" she cried. "There is my home!" By the way, if my voice feels all raspy and froggy, I've had a sore throat and a cold for the last few days, so yeah, apologies. The brownies looked down and saw 2 or 3 brown rocks sticking up out of the sea. On them lay mermaids and mermen. "Quick, turn the broom downwards," cried the mermaid. Jump turned it, and soon they were gaily gliding down to the rocks. Splash, splash! All the mermaids and mermen slid into the water and disappeared when they saw the broomstick gliding down to them. Bump! It came to rest on one of the rocks. Come back, called the mermaid. Is the little mermaid golden hair? Come back, I've been rescued." Up popped all the mermen and mermaids again, and directly they saw that it really was Golden Hair. What a fuss they made! They cried over her, and laughed over her, and patted her, and kissed her. Then one of the mermen brought a shell full of sea water, and set a spell over it. Golden Hair put her goblin feet into it, and to the brownies' astonishment, they changed into a beautiful glittering tail. Then flick! Golden Hair slipped into the water and swam about joyfully with the others. "Stay with us," she cried. "We will give you a lovely time." "No, thank you," answered Hop. "We'd very much like to, but we are in search of a stolen princess, so we must go." The brownies hopped onto the broomstick again, waved goodbye to the merfolk, sang the magic rhyme, and were soon off again. "I'm glad we were able to rescue Golden Hair," said Jump. "I do wonder where we'll go to next." "We mustn't any of us go to sleep," said Hop, "else we'll fall off the broomstick into the sea. Hold on tight till the morning." All night long the broom sailed over the sea. Soon the moon went down, and the brownies grew very sleepy indeed. As the sun rose, they saw that they had left the sea behind at last, and were flying over a wooded country. "Let's go down here," said Hop, yawning. "I'm longing to go to sleep." So they turned the broom downwards, and were soon among the trees. "What enormous trees!" exclaimed Skip in astonishment. "I've never seen such big ones before." They were enormous. When the brownies had landed safely on the ground, they craned their necks backwards to try to see the tops of the trees, but they couldn't. "And just look at the grass," cried Hop. "It's as tall as a house. And goodness me, is this a buttercup? Why, I could easily go to sleep in one of the buds. I could go to sleep anywhere," yawned Jump, lying down on a daisy leaf that was as big as a bed. "Good night, everybody." "Well, we'll explore the country when we wake," said Hop, and he chose a leaf too. Skip climbed into a bud, and very soon all the brownies were fast asleep. Suddenly they were awakened by an enormous noise. Crash, 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 crash! Hop woke up with a jump and looked around him. To his amazement, he saw walking by him the biggest pair of boots he had ever seen. They seemed as large as 2 small trees. Hop looked above them. "Gracious," he said, "there's legs in the boots." The brownies looked above the legs, and then, with a shout of fear, saw that the legs belonged to a body, and that the body had an enormous head with eyes like little lakes. "Ow!" cried Hop. "It's a giant. We've come to Giant Land." "Quick," said Skip. "Hide before he sees us." But it was too late. The giant had seen them and was staring at them in just as much astonishment as they had stared at him. Before they could run and hide, a great hand had come down and picked them all up. Then they were swished up into the air near the giant's head, whilst he had a good look at them. "Brownies," said the giant in a voice like very near thunder. "Brownies. Oh, the tiny wee things." "Let us go," yelled Hop in his loudest voice. "Oh, he squeaks like a mouse," said the giant, with a smile that showed enormous white teeth. "Squeak again, little man." "I'm not squeaking," shouted Hop angrily. "I'm shouting at you. Put me down, you're squashing me to bits." "Squeak away, said the giant. "I'll take you home and show you to my wife. What a find!" He stuffed the 3 brownies into his coat pocket and strode off. "Oh, it's like riding inside a camel's hump," said Hop, as the giant's coat flapped in the wind and swayed to and fro as he walked. "What a terrible fix we're in now," groaned Skip. "How in the world can we get away from here?" The brownies clung together, as frightened as could be. At last the giant stopped, put his hand in his pocket, and poured out the 3 brownies. "Look, wife," he said in his booming voice, "what do you think of these little chaps?" "Oh," thundered his wife in delight. "Are they real?" "Real enough," said the giant, setting them down on a table as big as a field. "Now then, squeak," he said, and gave Hop such a poke with his finger that he fell over and nearly tumbled off the table. The giant's wife was delighted with them. "We'll give a tea party this afternoon and show them to all our friends," she said. No, let us go back and find our broomstick," begged Skip. "Hark at him squeaking," cried the giant in delight, and gave him a poke that sent him head over heels. The giant's wife carefully put them into a box with some holes punched in to let the air through. She also put in a thimbleful of water and some crumbs of bread. The thimble was as big as a barrel and the crumbs as big as loaves, so that the brownies had more than enough to eat and drink. They were very upset indeed. "We seem to do nothing but get caught by someone or other," groaned Hop. "If only we could go back to fairyland." "Well, goodness knows what's going to happen to us this time," said Skip gloomily. "We're so small, luckily, compared with the giants, that they probably won't eat us. We shouldn't make more than a mouthful." "Ah, don't be horrid," said Jump, who didn't like the conversation at all. "Let's talk of something cheerful." All the day the giant's wife kept taking off the lid and peeping in at the brownies to see if they were all right. She put in 3 lumps of sugar for them to sit down on, and was very much amused to see them perched up on them. They heard her big voice rumbling all day long. The clatter that her pots and pans made sounded like crashes of thunder. When the afternoon came, the giant's wife took off the lid of the box and lifted the brownies out onto the table. She put some fresh water in the thimble and gave them a rag as big as a tablecloth for a towel, and told them to wash themselves and make themselves smart. "My guests will soon be here," she boomed, "and I want you to be a surprise for them." When the brownies had washed themselves and smoothed back their hair, the giant's wife picked them all up and carried them into another room, where a table was laid for tea. In the middle was a cake, and on top, made of pink icing, were 3 little chairs. "Buttons and buttercups," groaned Hop. "Look what she's done. We've got to sit on the cake." Sure enough, they had. The giantess popped each one, bump, onto a chair. "Now you sit there and don't move an eyelash," she said. "Everyone will think you're dolls. When I say, 'Now I'll cut the cake,' you're to jump out of your chair and cheer." The brownies felt very much annoyed. They didn't like the idea of pretending to be dolls at all, just to amuse a lot of giants. Skip jumped off his chair crossly. "No," he shouted loudly, "I won't." The giantess picked him up and gave him such a squeeze that he felt he was going to choke. "Now, "You do as you're told," she scolded in her enormous voice, "or I'll give you to the fowls to peck." Skip sat down very quickly on his chair. He didn't like the idea of being given to the fowls at all, nor did the others. They all sat as still as could be, in case the giantess said anything more. All around them gleamed great knives and forks and spoons, and huge glasses that seemed as big as houses. From the kitchen came a very nice smell. "That makes me feel hungry," said Hop, sighing. "What about chipping a bit off the cake?" asked Skip. "The giantess has gone out of the room for a minute." "Bite the knobs off the backs of your chairs," said Jump. "They're delicious." The three brownies bit them off, and very delicious they were. They tasted of honey and sugar, and the brownies were just going to nibble pieces off the back of their chairs too, when a most enormous noise made them fall off their seats in a fright. It was the guests knocking at the front door. Rat-a-tat-tat. The brownies began to tremble. It was rather terrifying to have to face a lot of giants at once. "They're so careless in picking us up and putting us down," groaned Hop. "And I hate being held tight," said Skip. "Shh," said Jump. "Here they come." With an enormous noise of tramping, talking and laughing, in walked 6 of the largest giants you could imagine. They were followed by the giantess and her husband, both of whom were smaller than their guests. "Ha!" said a giant, seating himself at the table. "I'm hungry." "Oh," said another, "I'm thirsty." The giantess made haste to bring in the teapot, and soon every giant was stuffing himself with sandwiches as big as mattresses. The noise they made too, it sounded like 20,000 pigs feeding at once. Suddenly one of them noticed the cake. "Oh," he said, "what a fine cake!" All the giants looked at it and thought it was very fine indeed. "I've never seen such nice figures before as those you've got sitting on your cake," said a giant. "Very nice indeed," bellowed a giant with an extra loud voice. All this time the brownies hadn't dared to move in case the giantess should keep her word and throw them to the fowls. They sat like dummies, staring straight in front of them. "They look quite real," said a giant, and bent closer to look at them. Then he took his fork and was just going to poke Hop with it when that terrified brownie leapt up into the air in fright and gave an anguished yell. "Ah!" The giant was so astonished that he dropped his fork with a clatter and sat open-mouthed. All the giants stared at the brownies in the greatest amazement. The giantess thought it was time to surprise her guests a little more. "Now I'll cut the cake," she said. At once Hop, Skip and Jump leapt out of their chairs and cheered as they had been told to do. The giants jumped in astonishment. "They squeak," said one. "They move," said another. "They must be alive," said a third. "They are," said the giantess proudly. "They're brownies. What do you think of that for a surprise?" She began cutting the cake, and the brownies jumped down onto the table. Directly the giants heard they were brownies, they began talking excitedly all at once, and each giant tried to catch a brownie so as to have a good look at him. The brownies starched their great fingers as best as they could. They hid behind glasses and under the edge of the plates. And Hop even jumped into the salt cellar and covered himself with salt. But it was no good. They were caught and held and passed from one giant to another. They hated it, for the giants held them so tightly, and seemed to enjoy giving them a poke now and again, just to see them roll head over heels. "I shall break my neck soon," panted Hop. "That's twice I've been poked over." "Let's pretend we're hurt," said Skip. "Perhaps they'll stop then." So Hop lay down on the table and groaned. Skip walked about with a limp, and Jump held his head as if it hurt him. The giantess, who had quite a kind heart, was most upset. "You've hurt the poor little mites," she cried. "Look at them. Leave them alone now, do, or you'll kill them. And I want to keep them for pets and give them to my children when they come back from their aunts." "Oh," groaned Hop. "Did you hear what she said? Goodness knows what giant children would do with us. What a terrible fix we are in." The giantess brought their thimble filled with lemonade and put some cake crumbs on a cotton wheel. "Here you are," she said, giving them lumps of sugar to sit on. "Sit down at this cotton wheel table and have your tea while we watch you." The brownies sat down and took the cake crumbs. They were as large as cakes and very nice. When they wanted a drink, they went to the thimble and sipped the lemonade. The giant soon grew tired of watching them and fell silent. The giantess rose and began clearing away the dishes into the kitchen. Then, one by one, the giants fell asleep. Snore, snore, snore went the giants, sleepy after their big meal. They breathed so heavily that they nearly blew the brownies off the table. "I say," shouted Hop, trying to make himself heard over the snoring, "let's escape." "How?" shouted Skip. "If one of the giants wakes whilst we are slipping away, he'll wake the others, and they'll all come thundering after us and kill us." "Think of an idea," said Hop. "No, think of an idea, Hop," shouted Jump. Hop thought, then he grinned. "What about the ointment?" he shouted back. "Shall we use that on the giants whilst they are asleep?" "Yes, yes," shrieked Skip and Jump, nearly deafened by the snores of the giants. "Get it out, quick, Hop." Hop got out of the boxes of ointment and opened them. "There isn't very much left of either of them," he shouted. "We'll use both and see what happens. Here, Skip, take the purple ointment, and I'll take the yellow. Jump, you keep a watch for the giantess." Hop and Skip ran across the table, and each climbed up a giant's arm onto his shoulder. They couldn't reach his forehead, so they rubbed the ointment onto his chin and hoped it would act just as well. Then down they clambered, and up onto two more giants' shoulders. Hop was nearly blown away by one tremendous giant, who puffed him nearly off of his arm. At last all the sleeping giants had the magic ointment rubbed onto their chins. "Now listen," shouted Hop, whose voice was getting quite hoarse. "I'm going to say the magic words. The giants will grow smaller and bigger, and they'll wake up in a terrible fright. We've got to escape whilst they are in a muddle. Climb off the table first." The brownies clambered down the tablecloth, slid down the table legs, and landed bump onto the floor. They ran to the door. Then Hop called out the magic words. At once 3 of the giants grew so much smaller that they were only about 3 times as big as the brownies. The other 4 grew so much bigger that their heads bumped against the ceiling. Their chairs broke with their weight, and they fell onto the floor with yells of fright. "Oh, oh, oh," they shouted in astonishment. The giantess came running in to see what was the matter. She couldn't believe her eyes. "What's happened?" she cried. "Oh, what's happened? Why have some of you grown small and some of you big? Oh dear, dear, dear." "Come on," said Hop, and he and the other brownies ran out of the door. The giantess saw them. "Oh, you've worked a spell on them," she cried angrily. "I'll catch you, you wicked little things." Hop, Skip and Jump raced across the kitchen floor as hard as they could and out into the garden. They hid under a large leaf and watched the huge feet of the giantess go clomping by, boom, 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 in search of them. "Good thing she didn't tread on us," said Hop. Then he saw something that made him shiver in fright. "Look," he said, "there's a giant hen, and there's another one that's scratching in the ground. Oh my, we've run into the fowl yard." The brownies trembled in fear. The hens came nearer and nearer, clucking and squawking as they scratched for grain. Suddenly one of them saw Hop under the big leaf. She pecked at him. He jumped away only just in time. "Run," he cried. "It's the only chance we have." They ran from beneath the leaf and tore across the yard. "Squawk, squawk," cried all the hens, and tore after them. "They'll catch us." panted Jump. Suddenly, Hop saw a large hole in front of him. Quick as lightning, he jumped into it and pulled the others after him. "It's a wormhole," he gasped. "Come on, it's our only chance of escaping those horrible birds." The hens were pecking and scraping around the hole. Their beaks sounded like picks and hammers. But once more the brownies were safe, for the wormhole was like a narrow tunnel, and they could pass along it easily, one after another. "I hope we don't meet a worm," said Skip. "It would be rather awkward, wouldn't it?" "I'd much rather meet a worm than a crowd of huge giants or a pack of greedy birds," said Hop cheerfully. "Come on. Goodness knows where this tunnel leads to, but anyway, it must lead somewhere." Their adventure in the land of clever people. The three brownies went on through the dark tunnel, hoping they would soon find it came to an end. It felt rather sticky, and Hop said it must be because a worm had lately passed along it. Just as he said that, the brownies heard a peculiar noise. "Oh my, I do believe a worm is coming." Hop groaned. It was a worm, a simply enormous one, for its body filled up the whole tunnel. "Ho!" shouted Hop in a panic. "Don't come any farther, Mr. Worm. You'll squash us to bits." The worm stopped wriggling in surprise. "What are you doing in my tunnel?" he asked. "Nothing much," said Skip. "Just escaping from a lot of greedy birds." "Oh," said the worm with a shudder. "I know all about birds. I've had my tail pecked off twice by the greedy things." "Do you know where this tunnel leads to?" asked Jump. "It leads to all sorts of places," said the worm. "You'll find crossroads a little farther on, and a signpost." "Oh, thanks," said Jump. "Then I think we'll be getting on." "So will I," said the worm, and began to wriggle towards the brownies. "Stop," they shouted. "There isn't room for you to go past us." "But I must," said the worm. "I've an appointment with my tailor at 6 o'clock. He's making me a few more rings for my body." "Oh, do go backwards till you get to the crossroads," begged Hop. "I'm going backwards now," said the worm. "At least I think I am. It's so muddling being able to use both your ends, you know. I never know which way I'm really going." "It must be very muddling," said Skip. "But please don't push past us. You're rather sticky, you know, and you'll spoil our suits, and we haven't got a tailor like you." "Dear, dear, you ought to have," said the worm. "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll bore you a little tunnel to stand in whilst I go past. Then I shan't spoil your suits." The worm began to make them a little passage leading out of the main tunnel. "There you are," he said. "Get in there, and you'll be quite safe." The brownies hopped in. Then, rustle, squelch, rustle, the worm pulled his long body past them, called goodbye, and left them. "Well, thank goodness, we've got over that difficulty," said Hop. "Now let's get to the crossroads before we meet any other worms." On they went again, meeting no one but a centipede, who fled past in such a hurry on his many legs that the brownies didn't know what he was. "We must be the fast train to Wormland, I should think," said Hop, picking himself up, for the centipede had rushed straight between his legs. Soon the brownies saw a light in the distance. They hurried towards it and found that they stood at the crossroads. In the middle was a signpost with a lamp on top. "To Giant Land," Hop read. "Oh, that's the way we've just come. What's this other way?" "To the land of giggles." "That sounds silly." "To Cross Patch Country." "That won't do for us." "Now what's this last one?" All the brownies peered at it. "To the land of clever people," they read. "Clever people might be able to tell us the way to which land," said Hop. "Yes, let's go," said Jump. "I hope they'll let us in," said Skip Jump doubtfully. I don't really feel very clever, you know." "You're not," said Hop. "I'm the clever one." "Yes, you were clever enough to get us all sent out to Fairyland," grumbled Skip. "Let's quarrel," said Hop. "Come on, and see what this new land is like." Off they went again, and found that the tunnel they were now in sloped upwards and was lighted by many little green lamps. "Green for safety, anyway," said Jump cheerfully. The lamps suddenly turned red. The brownies jumped in fright. "Red for danger," said Skip in a shaky voice. The lamps turned blue. Hop thought of an idea. I expected somebody in the land of clever people, showing us how clever they are, he whispered. Then aloud, he said in an admiring voice, blue for cleverness. All the lamps turned back to green. There you are, whispered Hop. Green for safety again. They went on up the slope and came to a corner. Just round the bend was a turnstile, and it was seated an ugly little man with an enormous bald head. He wore spectacles and was writing in a huge book. As the brownies grew near, he looked at them over his spectacles. Then he spoke in a way that gave the brownies rather a surprise. Good morning. Do I understand you wish to enter in this land? He's talking in poetry, said Jump. Isn't he clever? Are we supposed to answer in poetry too? We can't, said Skip. So that settles it. He turns to the turnstile man. Yes, we want to come in, he said. You see, The bald-headed man interrupted him. Please talk in rhyme. Unless you do, I simply cannot let you through. Oh, goodness gracious, groaned the brownies. They must be terribly clever people, said Hop. Let's see if we can't make up an answer in rhyme. They thought for some time, and at last they found one they thought would do. Hop went up to the turnstile man and bowed. Will you kindly let us through? There's lots of things we want to do, he said. At once the man waved his hand to tell them to pass, and his turnstile clicked as they went through. Before they left him, he handed them a book of rules. Keep every rule that's written here. You'll find them printed nice and clear, he said in his sing-song voice. Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to have a book to read, answered Hop as easily as anything. Hop, cried Jump when they had got out of the turnstile man's hearing. Hop, that was clever of you. How did you think of it? It just came into my head, said Hop, quite as surprised as the others. I believe I'll be quite good at it. What does the Book of Rules say? Asked Jump. Hop read it and told the others. Nothing much, he said. Always talk in rhyme. Make up a new riddle every day. Answer one. Not much, is it? I don't know, said Skip doubtfully. I think making up riddles is very hard. I'll look and see, said Hop, turning over the page. Oh, buttons and buttercups. What, Hop? Asked Skip and Jump. Anyone who can't make up riddles or answer them is spanked for being stupid, said Hop in dismay. Oh, I do wish we hadn't come here, said Jump. This is your fault again, Hop. You're always leading us into trouble. Let's go back to the turnstile man and ask him to let us out, said Hop. So they went back. Please let us out again, because we cannot keep your laws, said Hop after scratching his head and thinking hard for 5 minutes. The bald-headed man shook his head. Find rule number 32, and that will tell you what to do, he told them. Hop found it and read it. We can't get out of the land of clever people until we think of something that their very wise man cannot do, he told the others steadily. There isn't much hope for us then. Stay here all our lives, I suppose, said Skip gloomily, and be spanked every day, said Jump still more gloomily. The three brownies went sadly up the tunnel. They hadn't gone very far because they saw daylight, and to their joy they found out that they were once more above ground. They ran out of the tunnel and danced about in the sunlight. Then they stopped and looked to see what sort of country they were in. My, said Hop, it's rather queer, isn't it? It all looks so proper. It certainly did look proper. The house was set down in perfectly straight lines. All the windows were the same size and all the doors. All the knockers were the same, and they all shone brightly. The people looked very proper too. They all wore spectacles and had very large heads, and all the men were bald. If anybody hadn't been rather short and tubby, they would have looked frightening, but as it was, they looked rather funny. Skip began to giggle. They don't look as if they have ever smiled, he said. He chuckled. A fat little policeman came up to them. He put his hand heavily on Skip's shoulder. You mustn't giggle here, you know, or else to prison you must go. This is not the land of giggles. He stopped and looked at the brownies. The brownies looked back. Evidently, he expected them to finish the rhyme. Oh dear, Whatever will make a rhyme for giggles. What an awful word. The policeman coughed and repeated his lines again. Then he took out his notebook. Hop began to tremble. This is not the land of giggles, said the policeman in an awful, this is the last time sort of voice. How your little finger wiggles, said Hop suddenly. The policeman looked at his little finger in surprise. It wasn't wiggling. Still, Hop had made a rhyme, so he closed up his notebook and marched solemnly off. That was a narrow escape, said Hop in a whisper. It's a mean trick to leave someone to finish what you're saying in rhyme. Now remember, for goodness sake, don't giggle. We don't want to be sent to prison or to the land of giggles, do we? Night was falling. Lamps began to shine in the little streets. We'd better find a place to sleep, said Skip with a yawn. Another policeman suddenly appeared behind them. Hop saw him in time and made a rhyme hastily to fit his last sentence. Oh, look at that excited sheep, he said, pointing behind him. There was no sheep, of course, and by the time the policeman had discovered that, the brownies had fled down the street. They came to the neatest little house imaginable. In the window was a card. On it was printed, "Step inside and you will see lodgings here for 2 or 3. Just the thing, said Hop. Let us ring, he added hastily, as another policeman came round the corner and looked at them. He rang, the door opened, and a kind-faced old woman looked out. Would you let us stay with you, he asked, hoping that the old woman would finish the line. What can you pay me if you do? Asked she at once. Would 6 be enough to pay? Said Hop. Oh yes, it would. Please come this way, said the old woman, and led them inside. The house was very neat inside. The room the old woman took them to was queer looking. It had knobs there on the wall, and said Hop longed to both them to pass them and see what had happened. This is where you are to sleep, said the guide, and waited for Hop to finish the rhyme. Always look before you leap, said Hop solemnly. The woman stared at him and went out. This rhyming business is making me tired, said Hop when the door closed. I do hope we find some way of getting out of this land soon. What about pressing a few of these knobs? Look, this one's marked soup. He pressed it. A little door flew open in the wall, and there stood 3 mugs of steaming soup. Goodness, said Skip. That's clever, if you like. Let's have the soup. They soon finished it up and began pressing more knobs. The one marked chocolate brought them 3 packets of chocolates, and the one marked apples, a dish of apples. They thought it was a very good idea. Now, if these clever people had ideas like this only, said Hop, and no silly nonsense about rhymes and riddles and things, this would be a pleasant place to live in. He pressed a knob marked a bed. Immediately a bed rose from the floor under them and stood there ready to be slept in. The brownies rose with it and found themselves sitting on it. Skip gave a loud giggle. At once the window flew up. Whew. Was that a giggle that I heard? Demanded a policeman. Excuse me. Was that a giggle that I heard? Demanded a policeman, peering into the room. No, just a cough. Don't be absurd, shouted Hop. The window shut with a bang. There are policemen everywhere here, whispered Hop. For goodness sake, don't giggle any more, and only talk in whispers. At that moment there came a knock on the door. It opened, and in came a bright-eyed, gaily dressed little girl. Hello, she said. I heard one of you laughing. Are you from the land of giggles by any chance? No, we're not, said Hop in astonishment. Why aren't you talking in rhyme? I'm not one of the clever people, said the little girl. I can't make up rhymes properly. So, I usually don't talk at all. I come from the land of giggles. What are you here for then? Said Skip. Asked Skip. The little girl hung her head. I was discontented in my own land, she said, and I thought I was too clever for my people. So I came here, and now I can't get away because I can think of anything that the very wise men can't do, and I get spanked every single other day. because I can't make up riddles, I'll answer them. Who asks them? Asked Hop. Oh, everybody goes to the marketplace and stands in a row for their examination each morning, explained the little girl. Then the very wise man comes along, and you have to ask him your riddle and answer his. If you don't, he sends you to be spanked. It's to teach you to be clever. I don't think it's clever to do that sort of thing, said Skip, feeling sure he would be spanked every day that came. If you can help me to get back to my own girl, If you can help me to get back to my own people, I'll be so grateful, said the little girl, nodding her brown curls. We'll help you, said Hop, wondering however they could. When the little girl had gone, the brownies jumped into bed and were soon fast asleep. Their adventure in the land of clever people continued. When morning came, the brownies woke up very hungry. Soon they pressed a few knobs and got a simply lovely breakfast of porridge, honey and cocoa. Now we'd better think of some riddles, said Hop. All be quiet and think hard. So they thought hard. Hop thought of one first. What pillar is never used in building? He asked. Don't know, said the others. Why, a caterpillar, of course, said Hop with a chuckle. Very good indeed, said Skip. Listen, I've got one now. What walks on its head all day? Tell us, said the others. The nail in your shoes, chuckled Skip. Now jump. What lion is loose in the fields? Asked Jump. I know, cried Hop. The dandelion. Right, said Jump. Listen, what's that? There was a bell ringing. It must be to call us to the marketplace, said Hop. Come on. They all raced outside and saw a great stream of solemn, fat little people going down the street. The brownies joined them and soon came to a wide marketplace. The people ranged themselves in straight rows. A clock struck 9. Trumpets blew, and down the steps of the town hall came the very wise man. He had bigger spectacles than anyone else, and a very, very big head. Then began the examination. First, the very wise man asked his riddle, and then a clever person answered it and asked his. On went the very wise man to the next person. Everybody answers all right, whispered Hop. No one's getting spanked. Just then the very wise man came to the little girl who had spoken to the brownies the night before. She couldn't answer her riddle, and she was sent off to be spanked by the spanker, who lived in a little house nearby. Then came the brownies' turn. What pillar is never used in buildings? Asked Hop, rather shaky at the knees. Pooh, a caterpillar, said the very wise man. What walks on its head all day? Asked Skip nervously. Pooh, nail in your shoe, said the very wise man. What lion is loose in the fields? Asked Jump, almost forgetting his riddle when he felt the very wise man's eyes on him. Very feeble. Now answer me this. Why is a toasting fork? Why is a toasting fork? Said Hop, puzzled. It doesn't make sense, does it? Off to the spankers, roared the very wise man. Poor Hop went off to join the little girl. Now you, said the very wise man to Skip. Why is a garden rake? But that doesn't make sense either, said Skip. It isn't a proper riddle. Off to the spankers, roared the very wise man again, then turned to Jump. Why is a porcupine? He asked. I don't know, said Jump. Off to the sparkers, shouted the very wise man. I went out asking the clever people more riddles, which they seemed to answer perfectly. The brownies were well spanked by the spanker, who was a solemn little man with soft eyes and hair and a hard hand. They were very angry about it. It's all nonsense. Excuse me. It's all nonsense, said Hop crossly. He didn't ask fair riddles. I'll jolly well ask him to do something he can't do, and then we'll get away from here. Well, if you can do that, said the little girl, drying her tears, don't forget to take me with you. All that day the brownies wandered about the land of clever people with the little girl. It was a very solemn, proper land, and nobody laughed or skipped or ran. Poor Skip and Jump were sent to the spanker twice for not making a rhyme when they spoke. They felt sorrier than ever that they had left fairyland. Little tubby policemen seemed to be everywhere, and they soon began to feel that it was dangerous even to whisper. Next morning they couldn't think of any riddles, nor answer any, so off they went to be spanked again. Hop was getting very tired of it. I'll go and ask the very wise man to do something he can't do, he said. Where do I go? He asked the little girl. Go to the town hall at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she said. You'll find him there, waiting. So off the brownies went. They marched up the steps and found the very wise man sitting in a great red chair, studying an old book. Good afternoon, oh very wise man. Do what I ask you, if you can, began Hop. Build a castle in half an hour, with an entrance gate and one big tower. The very wise man descended from his throne and walked out of the hall. He drew a wide circle in the marketplace, muttered a few words, and waved his arms. Immediately there sounded the noise of hammering and clattering, although nothing could be seen. But lo and behold, at the end of half an hour, there stood in front of the astonished brownies a wonderful castle with an entrance gate and one big gleaming tower. Hop, Skip, and Jumper were too amazed to say a word. Then, with a wave of his hand, the very wise man caused the castle to vanish completely. After that, he turned to Hop. Off to the spankers, he said. So off Hop had to go. I'll think of something much more difficult next time, he decided. 4 days Hop and the others tried to think of new riddles, and to puzzle out something difficult to ask the very wise man. For days Hop and the others tried to think of new riddles, and to puzzle out something difficult to ask the very wise man to do. It didn't seem any good at all. They always seemed to be either going to or coming back from the spankers. At 3 o'clock each day, the brownies always went to the town hall with something new and difficult to ask the very wise man to perform, hoping that he wouldn't be able to do it. Oh, good. Once they asked him if he could make a ladder that reached to the stars, and he made a lovely one out of a rainbow. Hop wanted to climb it, but the very wise man wouldn't let him. You might escape, and that would be a most annoying thing for me, he said. Another afternoon, the brownies asked him to make a cloak which, when he put it on, would make him invisible. He did it at once, popped on the cloak, and none of the brownies could see where he was. He had disappeared. Let us put it on as well, and try the lovely magic spell, begged Hop, who thought that if only he could throw the cloak around himself and the other two, he might be able to escape unseen. But the very wise man would not let him. He sent them all off to the spankers instead. One evening the brownies were feeling very miserable indeed. I believe we shall have to stay here forever, groaned Hop. So shall I, sighed the little girl, rumpling her curly hair in despair. Don't rumple your hair like that, said Skip, or you'll be sent for a spanking again. He smoothed down her hair for her, and then picked up a curly bit that had broken off. Isn't it curly? He said. I wonder if I can make it straight. He pulled it out straight, but it went back curly. He wetted it, but it was still curly. Then he gave it to the others, and they tried to make it straight, but they couldn't. The very wise man could make it straight in half a minute, said Hop mournfully. Well, I should like to see him do it, said Skip. It simply won't go straight. Let's ask him tomorrow, said Jump hopefully. The next day the 3 brownies and the little girl went to the town hall at 3 o'clock. The very wise man was there as usual. Your next request I now await, said he, leaving Hop to finish the rhyme, but Hop was ready for once. Then make this curly hair quite straight, said Hop, handing it to him. The very wise man took it and looked scornful to think he had such an easy task. He pulled it out straight, then let it go one end. The hair sprang back into curl again. He wetted it and pulled it straight once more. It sprang back curlier than ever. He stamped on it. He clapped it between his hands. He waved it in the air. He put it between the pages of a book. Not a bit of good did anything do. It only made the hair twice twice as curly as before. Then the very wise man called for a hot iron and a cold iron. He ironed it first with one and then with the other, but the hair sprang back to its curliness and wouldn't stay straight. The brownies watched in the greatest excitement, their hearts beating quickly. I don't believe he can do it, cried Jump. The very wise man was so worried that he didn't notice Jump hadn't spoken in mime. He couldn't think what to do with that wretched hair. At last he knew he was beaten. He sank back on his throne, mopped his forehead, and asked Hop to let him off. Yes, I will, said Hop, if you will do what I want you to do. If not, I'll tell all the clever people how stupid you are. Stupid you are. Talk in rhyme all the time, said the very wise man. Nonsense, said Hop. I'm not going to talk in rhyme anymore. It's silly when you can talk better another way. Now, are you going to do what I want? Yes, said the very wise man sadly. First of all, said Hop, tell me where the Princess Perenelle is. In which land, with which green eyes? Answered the very wise man. How can we get there? Asked Hop. Take the green railway to Fiddlesticks Field, said the very wise man, and ask the saucepan man to tell you the way. He knows it. Now the next thing is, said Hop, feeling he was doing very well, you must let this little girl go back to the land of giggles. Oh no, I can't do that, said the very wise man crossly. All right, said Hop, I'm going out to tell the people all about how you couldn't make a curly hair straight. Oh, you are brave, Hop. I'm going out to tell the people all about how you couldn't make a curly hair. What? Oh, you are brave, Hop, cried the little girl, kissing him. Thank you for sticking up for me. Hop caught hold of the very wise man's shoulder and daringly shook him. Will you let her go? He demanded. Yes, leave me alone, growled the very wise man. And the next thing is, take us out of this horrid land of yours, said Hop. You're not clever people a bit, you only think you are. You think it's clever to be solemn and proper and never laugh or skip. Well, it isn't, it's just silly. Come along, said the very wise man suddenly. I'll take you out of the land now. I shall be glad to be rid of you. He strode down the hall, out into the marketplace, and through the streets of the town. The brownies and the little girl followed him in delight. At last they came to a high wall, and in it was a gateway and a turnstile. A big-headed fat little man sat there. He stared at them in surprise. Am I to let these people out? He asked doubtfully. Yes, you are, cried Hop, laughing to see the little man's horror when he heard him speak without rhyming. Then Hop turned to the very wise man. There's just one thing more to do. Wait, there's just one thing more you've got to do, he said. I will do it, said the very wise man. Well, listen, said Hop. Answer me some of the silly riddles you asked us each morning. Now, why is a toasting fork? Why is a garden rake? Why is a porcupine? The very wise man hung his head. I don't know, he said. Well, if you aren't mean and horrid, cried Hop. It's unfair to ask people riddles, you know. It's unfair to ask people riddles you know haven't got answers, and then send them to be spanked because they don't answer them. Now I'll give you just one more chance. Why is a garden rake? The very wise man shook his head. All right, said Hop, grinning. After the spanker's with you, tell him to give you his best spanking. The very wise man gave an awful yell and ran away before Hop could say anything more. Hop and the others clicked through the turnstile and chuckled. That just serves him right, said Skip. Excuse me. He won't be so keen on spanking now. And that will conclude part 2 of my reading of the Book of Brownies by Enid Blyton. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you all enjoyed it and you have either fell asleep or you are feeling really relaxed. Thank you so much again. And remember, if I don't see you before, I'll see you the next time I see you. Good night.